Hi there guys, it's Joey and today's video is going to be called, I think, the Morrigan Blunt Force Goddess ? And this video comes in response to a question I had, which a young lady sent me, and I did respond, but as I was responding it was becoming a longer answer and a longer answer, and I could feel it becoming longer and longer, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do a video and we can talk about it properly. So before we get into the meat of the video, I am behind on video content. I apologise for that. Like people probably do know and probably are aware, we had an inspection, which means everything had to be clean. And not just normal standards, like crazy standards. So that took like a week of solidly making sure that all the most obscure things were sorted. And that kind of took it out of me, and then, sorry men, but period from hell, to the point where I actually went back to bed twice for small naps yesterday, which I never do. So yeah, but we will endeavour to get on with it anyway. So I've got my labradorite point, my generator. Oh, look at it, so beautiful. Look at this beauty. I meditate with this a lot when talking with the Morrigan. It's so beautiful. So I'm going to be hanging on to this, and I highly recommend it for anybody working with the Morrigan energies. Labradorite is, I can't even put it into words properly. It's something else. So the point of this video, the Morrigan Blunt Force Goddess ? Ties a little bit into themes of warlike goddesses, and the question that was posed to me was that the person in question, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't want to mention any names in case anybody doesn't want to be mentioned, so paraphrasing, that they had heard that the goddess Morrigan was very blunt and to the point and kind of forceful, and they hadn't had that experience in coming across the Morrigan. And they had found it was subtle and gentle energies and hints and clues and things, and they were sort of beginning to doubt whether they were actually in contact with the Morrigan or not, because they had heard from other people that the Morrigan was blunt and forceful and in your face, blunt force trauma basically, smack to the head, and there you go. And as I was sort of discussing this in the course of my email response, I was like, I've addressed this in little bits in passing in like my experience type videos, but I haven't really sort of delved into it. And the Morrigan was like, and I'm like, okay, I can take a hint. And that's kind of the point. Okay, so my response to the initial question went along the lines of, it's actually, in my experience and from what I have heard and seen, more usual for her to do this sort of dance with people in the beginning, and it's sort of subtle hints and clues are making you work out that it's her. So I've said in my videos I had no idea who my matron goddess would be, and I worked in the abstract for a long time, and only when I felt ready did I sort of open myself up to the universe in general and say, you know, this is something I feel I'm ready for and I need now. And the Celtic pantheon is the only pantheon I had not done extensive research on, and so it was the last pantheon I expected, and it was possibly the last goddess I would have expected. But when it happened, it felt completely right. It felt like just coming home, like it just felt good. But there were these hints and clues, and it was a bit like a treasure hunt of work it out for yourself. And that for me is how the Morrigan is. You know, I have never heard personally stories of people being like, yeah, she was just like there and that was it. And that doesn't work in my mind. And people have this vision of her as being direct and blunt and forceful and to the point. because people say these things, and I think it takes a measure of explanation, or a measure of delving into that a little bit more than telling beginners that, you know, she will be right up in your face and you'll know it's her, there's no mistaking her. There is no mistaking her, and once you get to know her energy versus anybody else's energy, you'll be like, yeah. And her energy can be very overwhelming for some people, it can be too much for some people, and that kind of ties in and feeds into this. She's really, really forceful energy, and if she wants your attention, she's going to smack you around the head. Now, in my personal opinion and feeling and experiences, the only time that she is really in your face like that is if she wants you to pay attention to something. You know, something is important and you must pay attention, pay your due, respond, acknowledge something. And it can, I guess, be because she's pissed at you, which I haven't had the unfortunateness of having that full on at any point, because I try to be anyway, I try to be very respectful, humble and giving in my practice. Obviously there are things that get in the way of spirituality, and I always really, really dislike having my routine disrupted with regards to the Morrigan in particular. And I think that counts for something, you know, that it's not something that I really want to happen, is things to get out and messy, and they do because of life, but it's sort of the intention is there, the feeling, the wanting to be the best version of myself that I can be in her name, in her light, if you like. And I don't think that she is a blunt force trauma goddess at all. And we're going to talk a little bit about warlike stuff as well, because this is something people have some interesting stereotypes about. And so I said, I think in response to this email, it's more likely that she would be subtle and give you all these clues and hints, and you'll look back over time and think, and that adds up to that, and oh, I'm such an idiot for not seeing it sooner. That's how it happened with me. And it was things like, things right up in the present of when I called to her, discovered her, and like the Orthoceras, and a huge love of Samhain, and all these little factors. I'd actually called on the Washer of the Ford in an earlier ritual just because I liked the sentiment before I knew that it was one of her names, and I just found the imagery around that idea beautiful. And something that was said in the email, and it's actually something that applies to me too, is the person thought at first they may be connected with Hecate, and then it wasn't quite right, it wasn't the same energy. And the thing about this is my sister, who I'm very close to, and is a lot like me but is different from me, follows Hecate. And I'm like my sister but different in a lot of ways, and I follow Morrigan, so it kind of makes a lot of sense to me in that energies are similar but not the same. So there is that. Now, why do I feel that the Morrigan as a goddess is more likely to be subtle than in your face, rather, apart from which is, you know, you must pay attention to something? Well, there are a number of factors. I've discussed at length the fact that she is the silent watcher. It's one of her names, and it's something that a lot of people struggle with when it comes to the Morrigan, that she will back right out at points, and she will watch you dealing with this, that and the other. And some people are like, oh, she's gone, she's left me, she's abandoned me, can't handle this. And that's your test, and you failed it basically, because if you think that she has gone and you've been abandoned and you can't handle it, then you can't handle her, and that's the test basically, usually. You've given up faith on her. And she's very funny about this. And if I get to the point where I really, really need her and when she's doing this, I will just say to her, I know that this is going on. I know that you've never been gone, but I really need you right now. And never once has she not shown me something, or I felt her energy surround me, or I've had crows show up. Quite frequently, this is possibly a bit weird to say, but when I'm in the car driving home and we come through all the fields and things, quite frequently I sort of slip into this meditative state, because there's something about vehicle movement. Like, I can sleep really easily on journeys like that, and when we used to go on holidays as kids, I used to sleep half the journey away. And so there's something about the rhythm, and I just go and get into a meditative state. So quite frequently when I'm doing that, I'm actually sort of communing with her, or speaking to her, or offering prayers up to her, just because I'm zoning out of the real life, taking in all the nature as it's going past. And there are nearly always some sort of crow signs when I'm doing this, nearly every single time. And this week's crow sign was actually, I was blown away by it when I saw it. There was a hawk in one of the crow's fields near to where we live, very near, just outside the village. And I was looking, I was like, I saw it like, ooh, a hawk, like, oh my god, you know, you don't see them that often. I see a few times a year where we live. And then the crows were chasing it off. And there were a couple of crows, and they were just chasing it off. And it was this very little nip and move and you know, and move away type tactic. And the reason that I tell you this is because this to me ties in to why I feel that the goddess Morrigan is not blunt force, in your face type of a goddess all the time, or not usually, in fact. And this is because the idea of the Morrigan is often portrayed as being, and this drives me nuts, as just a goddess of war and death. And I've had people call me, like go for it till they're blue in the face, that she is just a goddess of war and death. And I'm like, I'm not even engaging with that, because it's just so limiting and stereotypical and boxing a goddess in and just and what people seem to do with the war aspect, they fear it, because in modern times war, for the West anyway, is something that generally speaking happens elsewhere. We are so divorced from the true natures of war that we don't respect it in the way that our ancestors would. We don't have the closeness to life and death and the respect for it in the way that we used to when we in ancient times. And another thing, of course, is that the nature of warfare has, of course, changed. And as a result, the goddess has evolved, and she was never just war anyway, but yeah. And people seem to think, you know, if she's a goddess of war, that must mean she's, I don't know how else to explain it, but this idea of it's sword first and violence and blunt force trauma. Like, she's obvious and blunt and aggressive and angry and violent, these things. Forgetting, of course, that war is not just won on violent acts. War is made up of tactical decisions, spies, manipulation of situations, word of mouth, messages, tactics. All these different elements of what makes up war, as in figuring out what your enemy is going to do and beating them at it. And so many wars have hinged on these sort of nuances, if you like, these subtleties that exist within the world of warfare, because the warfare is basically humans v humans for the most part, apart from when humans seem to declare war on nature, which is a whole other thing. And it's basically the minds of great men, and usually great men, unfortunately, because of the history and the sexism that's inherent in a lot of warfare, not all warfare, and there are great women, of course, within warfare, but when you look at generals, it's depressing to me, so, you know, it's not something that I'm like, yay about. But there's all these subtleties and nuances and threads throughout warfare that are so often not considered. And because we are so divorced from what war is in the West, at least, and the terribleness of it and the many, many levels of warfare, we don't really seem to think of, there seems to be this idea that because she is a goddess of warfare, you know, she must be blunt force trauma, she must be in your face, she must be violent, aggressive, and it's like, you only need to go look at the myths where she's warning Maeve, or she's trying to, I don't know, warn Cuchulainn, I can never pronounce that, Cuchulainn, her great hero. My brain is not with it, you have to bear with me. Or the fact that she, you know, that she helps battles to be won through magic, through other means, as well as just the sword. And this seems to get lost somewhere in translation. That she's going to be in your face, you're going to know it's her, she's going to be like boom boom boom, and this is what you have to do. And she's just not. She's... in my experience, it tends to be, right, I'm here, this is me. This is our relationship, and this is my advice, and you go do it. You go do it. You better go do it. And that's her, rather than, you know, and she tends to want you to be doing everything. She's not gonna like carry you. Nope. It's gonna be like she will drag you by your bootstraps, if you like, until you get up and get going and get on with it. But it's never this sort of blunt force aggression that seems to get portrayed with the goddess. She, for me, has, you know, it tends to be subtle messages and a lot of symbology and imagery, and there will be dream work, things that keep popping up and thematically. And I recommend for anybody in a spiritual path of any kind, but particularly this one, journaling. And you will see me say this a lot, and I do this every week, and you'll see me with my oracle card every week, and I'll discuss important quotes that I thought were important and struck me, and messages and things that struck me. I'm obviously a very vocal person, a very voice witchy person. And so things of that nature really resonate with me, and I take meaning from them and then incorporate that into who I want to be and figuring out who I am and all the rest of it. And it's like an ongoing journey, an ongoing process, an ongoing feeling of spiritual faith and things of that nature, and basically taking on all these different clues and the waves of universe speaking to me. And that's, for me, my relationship with the Morrigan, and drawing down on that and living the spiritual path. So I don't think she is in your face and aggressive, and I think she's going to be that way if you've irritated her. I would be worried if you'd managed to irritate her that much. I mean, there is a point after, if you really piss her off, she'll just leave, and you'll be much worse the wear for that. I personally feel, you know, that there's a difference between her silent watching and like gone, and I always feel her energy around, and if I'm ever slightly worried, I'm like, mother, and you know, I will feel it. I feel it in my gut, in my heart, and my soul. So she's a no-nonsense goddess, that's absolutely true, but I just feel there's this sort of jump cannon, jump ship thing with regards to her being just war and everything so bloody and violent. And it's really weird how people are like really quick to be, she's female power and blood and war, and therefore it's a negative, and it's like, what? okay, I don't really fully understand where you're coming from with this, just because it's like female empowerment and a goddess of war being associated with a woman, a female energy, a goddess, not a woman, a female archetype, I guess, is what I was hinting at. And I think the negativity that, you know, surrounds this stereotype is something that I'm constantly feeling that I have to quickly, you know, address when people are coming to me and they're like, they're afraid because they think the Morrigan is contacting them and they're worried that she's going to be aggressive and angry and violent and blunt, or their experiences are not adding up to what they think the people are telling them. And I had that in the beginning as well. People are like, oh, I don't think you want to get too involved with the Morrigan. And I was like, yeah, for you, dude. I don't listen to people. I'm like, I will do what I want to do. No, I was like, I'll be fine. And if you know, I would never was once afraid of the Morrigan, and I have not felt fear in my heart at any point. And I think if you're afraid, you're doing something completely wrong and you're on a path that you shouldn't be addressing, because fear shouldn't be coming into your relationship with divinity at all. So I just wanted to make a video, it's not too long on that point, you know, just discussing that idea that she's not blunt force trauma. And she has all these many aspects to her. She's a primal goddess. As far as I'm concerned, she goes back beyond the Celtic pantheon and comes forward to our modern point. So we shouldn't be judging her as a Celtic goddess on her own. Like, this is what the Celts felt about her, so that's it. Whereas all that's very useful and helpful and helps us internalise and give us a look and understanding. It is a point in history, and as far as I'm concerned, she goes back beyond that in time and to now in time, and time in itself anyway is a human construction. I don't think time is as linear as we think it is, but that's a whole other topic. So it's a bit like the crow who can see one eye forward, one eye back in the imagery and the symbology in the myth, and they can see time, past, present and future, and everything in flux, everything in motion. And she is primarily in that shapeshifter energy, existing outside of what we understand as time and being more than that, you know, there's spirituality and such. So she has all these different elements to her. She's a goddess of magic and mystery and myth, and she also has her elements of her being a maiden mother crone goddess, but so much more than that, because they all interflow into one another. It's not boom boom boom, it's not maiden mother crone. It's all interflowing, interweaving, the great web, the great tapestry, as I like to call it. And they're all like tiny little threads, tiny little stitches in the great tapestry of which we can't fully comprehend. So getting very hung up on one idea of how one goddess should be is a bit problematic, and I understand the apprehension when people are very new or completely new, and then because I had that moment at the very beginning, like, I've only ever heard negative things, and you know, me being me, I'm like, I'm gonna find out, I'm gonna learn, I'm gonna seek. And that's something that Morrigan really goes for. Some people who seek, I want to know, I want to explore, I want to go deeper than that, I want to keep going, I want to question both sides, I want to argue and think and break out of the box, break out of these like preconceived ideas of what things should be, and have been through hell and high water and have a completely different perspective, etc. So in terms of her being no, I really don't like that perception of her. I think that that comes from a place of fear, personally, like the idea that she's just an aggressive, forceful goddess. So I'm not saying by any measure, by the way, that either she can't be like that, because she can. If she's pissed at you, good luck with that. I'm not saying she can't be angry, and her anger is beyond anything that we humans can muster up. Washer at the ford whose wrath you can't afford. one of my lines. And you know, I'm not saying at any point either that warfare isn't something horrendous and ugly and you know, jarring and deeply painful and hurtful and scarring either. It certainly is, but we tend to be divorced from the nature of it. So that is going to be it for this video. Many blessings.